Hi, my name is Mackenzie, and today we are going to read Dumbo Not So Fast. Now, before we start reading, have any of you guys seen this character before? Take a closer look. Maybe on TV or when you were younger, you saw this in cartoons. And then when we look at the cover, if you don't know who it is, what do you think is going on? And what do you think is going to happen in the book? I'll take a closer look. Let's get started. Dumbo the little elephant with the big ears was the star of the circus. Every time he arrived in a new town, people would crowd to the big top to see his amazing show. They were never disappointed with Timothy the Mouse perched on his hat. Dumbo would climb to the top of the tent and jump off. Just as he was about to hit the ground, he would flap his ears and take off flying through the air. The crowds would cheer as he rocketed by grinning and waving his trunk. Have any of you guys ever been to a circus like this? Are flying elephants real? Dumbo loved his new life. He loved the cheers and excitement. Most of all, he loved the speed. The other elephants paddled. Dumbo zoomed. The other elephants slept late. Dumbo got up with the sun. The other elephants chewed slowly and deliberately. Dumbo gulped down his food so he could fly off in search of more adventures. Do elephants usually fly and act all fast like Dumbo, or are they slow and take their time when they walk? What do you think? Dumbo grew impatient with anything that took a long time, especially chores. He would zip around the circus, tackling one duty after another, but never spend much time on anything. As a result, he didn't always do a good job. Slow down, Dumbo, his mother would call to him. Remember, anything worth doing is worth doing well. But Dumbo did not listen. He was much too busy speeding around. What kind of chores do you do at home like Dumbo has to do before the circus? Even Casey Jr. was too slow for Dumbo. He and Timothy would ride on the train for a while, but then Dumbo grew very impatient. Before Timothy knew what was happening, the two of them would be high above the train, flying ahead to the next town. "It's a great view from up here," said Timothy. "Too bad it's going by so fast." On one trip after an especially hard day of travel, the train pulled into a town late in the afternoon. Dumbo and Timothy, who had arrived hours ago, settled up to watch as the elephants started putting up the circus tent. The elephants began to work in their slow, careful way. First, they unloaded the tent and tent poles. Then they waited for the roustabouts to dig the holes for the poles, making sure they were just the right size. What do you think a roustabout is? When you look at this picture, what predictions can you make that a roustabout is? You're right. A roustabout are the people helping put up the circus tent, so more like laborers or workers to help out the other animals build the circus tent. Dumbo fidgeted as he watched. Timothy said, "Too slow for you, kid?" "Sorry, but that's just the way it is with elephants." "Well, most elephants are slow." The elephants were just about to rise the tent poles when the ringmaster said, "It's getting dark, everyone. Let's call it a day. We'll finish setting up tomorrow." As the elephants plodded back to the train, Dumbo flew over to join them. He found his mother and trotted along beside her feet. "Come along, sweetheart," she said, smiling. "Time for bed." Dumbo snuggled up to his mother and tried to sleep, but he couldn't. He decided to take a little walk instead. Soon he found himself outside by the circus tent. I can put this up in no time, thought Dumbo, and he set to work. Why do you think Dumbo can't sleep? What are his personality traits to make him think that he cannot sleep next to his mom and he's so antsy to get the tent done? Timothy, meanwhile, was having a dream. He was on a boat in the middle of a storm, riding the waves up and down. He looked off into the distance and saw a giant wave moving towards him. Hold on tight, he called. Here comes a big one. The wave hit, and Timothy was thrown into the air. Grabbing the side of the boat, he hung on for dear life. What do you think is happening to the weather to make the waves look this big? Have you ever seen waves this big? Where at? Just then Timothy woke up. He found that he was indeed hanging on, but not to a boat. He was dangling from Dumbo's hat as the little elephant flew back and forth in the moonlight. Dumbo, what are you doing? Cried Timothy. It's the middle of the night. Scrambling back into the hat, Timothy peered over the side. That's when he saw what was happening. Dumbo was putting up the circus tent. Unlike the other elephants, though, Dumbo wasn't working slowly. He was moving as fast as he could, and for Dumbo, the flying elephant, that was very fast indeed. Listen, kids, said Timothy, this is a pretty big job. Dumbo kept working. You know, said Timothy, it may be harder than it looks. Dumbo kept working. Even if you can do it, said Timothy, the other elephants won't be happy. Still, Dumbo didn't listen. Dumbo had thought he could finish in a few hours, but he found that the job would take a lot longer than that. Even for a speedy elephant like him, he dragged the heavy poles into the holes in the ground. Then he tried to tie the ropes to the poles to hold them steady, but the ropes were hard to tie, so he tossed them aside. What do you think Dumbo should do? Should he do the right thing and wait for the other elephants to help him in the morning, or do you think he should just rush it and continue making the circus tent? Finally, Dumbo brought out the big canvas tent and pulled it over the tent poles. I don't know, said Timothy, eyeing his friend. That tent looks a little shaky to me. But Dumbo thought the tent looked fine, and he knew the others would be impressed when they found out how quickly he had to put it up. How does Dumbo look now after he worked all night putting up the tent very quickly and not the right way? Late that night, a cold wind began to blow. It ruffled the grass and made the leaves shiver. Gathering strength, it bent the trees over and pushed the storm clouds across the sky. But the time it reached the circus, the wind was howling. As Dumbo slept, the tent flapped and shook. Without ropes to hold them down, the posts gave way one big one. Finally, in a tremendous gust of wind, the big top came crashing to the ground. Dumbo was up early the next morning to admire his work. When he peered outside, he was shocked. That tent poles were scattered like twigs, with the tent twisted around them. Timothy gulped. Oh no, he said. I think we've got a problem. Dumbo and Timothy weren't the only ones watching. So were all the other performers, including the elephants. They had begun planning to finish putting up the tent that morning. Now everyone wondered whether the circus would open at all that day. Timothy stated Dumbo was just trying to help. Honest. Now everyone knew who had caused the mess. Mrs. Jumbo stood beside her son. All of us want the circus to open on time, she said. If we can work together, maybe it still can. You think Dumbo could help? Asked Timothy, she replied. I suppose so, if he promises not to rush. And so the elephants began, with Dumbo working alongside them. They gathered up the tent poles, they untangled the tent, then the roustabouts dug new holes, and the elephants raised the poles once again. Dumbo was amazed to see that even though the elephants moved slow, the job went quick, because everyone worked together. Dumbo and his friends were still trying to finish when people began to arrive to buy tickets. With the crowd watching in fascination, the elephants hoisted the big top into place. Then Dumbo flew high into the air and placed the banner on the very top. We did it, cried Timothy. The circus is going to open. That day, Dumbo gave his best performance ever. Stepping off a high platform, he fell towards the ground. Then, at the last minute, he started to fly. He raced around the big top as fast as he could. Then, remembering what he had learned, Dumbo slowed down. Now he noticed that the crowd was no longer a blur. He could see every face, and each one was smiling. Dumbo slowed down even more. He wanted this happy feeling to last a long time. Fast, faster, fastest. Speed is lots of fun, but fastest isn't always best when work has to be done. Slow, slower, slowest. If you try it, you can tell that anything is worth doing is a thing worth doing well. So after listening, what was Dumbo's mistake and what did it teach you? Dumbo always rushed his plans and turned out bad. So now you know you don't want to follow in the Dumbo's footsteps and take your time, because if you take your time, things work out as planned and things don't get messed up.